I often say that we get this question a lot because it's true for many of the questions. This question, which I will be answering today, we don't get a lot. But we recently got it from a client of ours who is thinking about moving apartments, which is actually one thing before I go into the topic. If you're not sure about something, if you plan on doing something important, so changing the type of your visa, quitting your job, changing your school program, changing apartments, I would always recommend you to first speak with us or someone else who is experienced in that field and discuss the change before you actually make it. Because from our experience, this is how people get in trouble. That they do something without thinking about it, without like seeing all the consequences, and then they end up regretting. Of course, not everyone, but it can happen. So there's nothing easier than just getting in touch and saying, hey, I would like to move apartments, what should I do? Or I would like to change employers, how it will impact my immigration status in the Czech Republic. And once you know, then you can decide if to do that or not, or at least do it safely. So this is actually, I was super happy that the client brought this topic up because it's one of the few people who actually ask before they make some major change. So this is a good topic, probably not for everyone, but I wanted to make a video about that as well because it's important, and at some point in your life you will need these like tips as well because you will be going through this as well. So the topic is what you should do when you're changing apartments, meaning when you move from one apartment to another in the Czech Republic. So I decided to give you 5 tips about that, five topics or 5 things you should think about and you should not forget to do when you're moving apartments. I will start with number 5, which is kind of the least important, and then I will gradually get to the most important ones, which can influence a lot of things here. So number 5. Handover and photos, which means always make sure that when you're moving out of the apartment, that you have some documents signed, that you have the termination of the lease agreement, or if you're moving at the end of the lease period, at least that you have the handover protocol. Because the handover protocol is not just a formality. Of course, it's a formality. It should be there. It should be done. It should be given to you. So yes, you should have it from this perspective. But the other thing is that in the handover protocol, or what is the purpose of the handover protocol, is that you state there everything important. So you should state all the measurements on the electricity meter, gas meter, water meter, everything, because that can influence some of the other things we'll be going through. So definitely this should be written in the handover protocol. Then you also list if there are any damages in the apartment. That's also important from the perspective of getting your deposit back. That will be the next topic, and other things. Plus, you should always make photos of the state of the apartment when you're leaving. The same thing is actually what you should do when you move into the apartment. So if you're taking over the apartment when you just moved to a place, you should always take photos, especially of those things that are already kind of not destroyed probably, but not working or scratched, or where there are some problems. Because if you move out 2 years later, 3 years later, even after 1 year, you will not remember every small scratch that there was on some piece of furniture or something. And then the landlord could try to say, hey, this is what you did, you need to pay for the repair, whatever. And only if you have photos, or if it's written in the handover protocol, you can argue that, okay, this was already here when I was moving in, and you have some legal ground to like discuss or fight with your landlord. So the same is true for when you live in the apartment, because what could happen later if you don't take photos is that the landlord will contact you like 2 weeks later saying, hey, I've just discovered that the toilet is broken or something. And if you don't have photos, and if it's not written in the handover protocol, or you don't have the handover protocol, then it's just your word against his. And if he's holding or she's holding your deposit, then you are on the shorter side of the rope. That leads us to number 4, and that's your deposit. Because getting your deposit back is one of the most important things from this perspective. and it can be problematic. The easiest way, which happens but not that often, is that you get the deposit in cash or transferred to your account at the date of handing over the apartment. That's possible, that's preferable, but it's not always like that, especially if you deal with companies like letting agents, companies taking care of apartments. They usually don't give you the deposit back right away. They give it to you after some time. And you should be very careful. But again, this is already one of the things you should check when you're moving in, when you're signing your lease agreement. I made another video about that, so I will share the link somewhere here, or I will share it I will share the link to that in the description of the video as well. So it's one of the things you should check in the beginning, but you should also confirm at the end of the lease. When you're moving out of the apartment, you should agree on, okay, so when I will get my deposit back and why? Because often landlords keep the deposit until they make the final calculation of the electricity, gas consumption, water consumption. And only after that, they will calculate if you owe something for these supplies or not. This is reasonable, but in some cases, the amount of time you have to wait for the deposit is unreasonable. Because I've seen in the 12 years we've been in the business that, for example, in one of the contracts we saw was written that you would get the deposit only after the yearly calculation. So it means if the calculation is done in December and you move out in January, you could wait 11 months for the deposit to be recalculated and sent to you. So it's very important to speak concretely about when you will get the deposit, how you will get the deposit. Because of course, if you're moving within the Czech Republic, you still keep your Czech bank account, all that, that's easy. You can meet the landlord 2 weeks later and get cash, that's okay. But if you're moving somewhere else outside of the Czech Republic and you cancel your Czech bank account, no one is here, then you might end up never getting the deposit back, because the landlord just will not be able to send it to your foreign bank or Revolut or somewhere. So you need to agree on this as well, and also speak with them about what they might or might not take of the deposit. It's of course, these things, like the electricity, if you have any debts there, all that. But what can often happen is, or also happen is, that they will try to find any damages or scratches or something, or they will paint the walls or something, and they will try to deduct it from your deposit, which again can be legal and can be reasonable, but you should know about that before you move out. Because if you move out without discussing this, then 2 months later you might receive 5,000 crowns instead of your 30,000 crowns deposit, and you will have no idea what is that. So that's second important thing. Number 3, related to that as well, make sure that you cancel or change everything which is related to the apartment. So couple major things: internet, because not whatever provider you have, O2, Vodafone, T-Mobile, whatever, they might not have connection in all the other buildings in the Czech Republic. So if you now have O2 and you're moving to a building where they only have Vodafone cables, you will not be able to transfer the internet. So you should also kind of think about this ahead of time when you're already looking for the new apartment, to see if you can transfer the internet there, if they have the provider you have currently, or if you need to cancel the internet and then get a new one from a different provider. Otherwise, you might end up paying 2 internets at the same time, one for a place where you no longer live. Sometimes you could transfer the contract to the landlord or to the new tenants directly. So this is also important to think about in advance. Second thing from this subtopic would be insurance, for example. If you have insurance for the property, remember to cancel it, or again, move it to the new apartment. Just modify it, change the address and move it to the new apartment. Because otherwise you would be paying an insurance for a place where you don't live. So maybe the new tenants would be happy, but probably not your wallet. That's another thing. Also, for example, your business address. If you have a trade license or if you have a company, and you move to a new place, you should also remember to move your business address. Otherwise, the business address stays on the address where you no longer live, and that's not good for many reasons. And anything which might be tied to that particular place. So that's also very important to make sure that you change all these contracts you might have attached to the flat. Of course, electricity, gas, make sure that you deregister from those, or that you transfer the electricity or gas contracts to the new apartment. That can also take some time, including the internet and everything. So you should think about this ahead of time. The fourth thing, the second most important thing, is to change your mailing address. Change it everywhere, because you don't even think about this. You don't remember all the places where you have registered this address, but in the future that could cause some trouble. So from top of my head, definitely your bank account. In your bank you should report this. Of course, all the contracts like insurance, internet, business address, all that's everywhere you should report the change of address. Maybe also a social security, healthcare provider, tax office if you're registered with the tax office as a freelancer or something. So think about all the different possible places. Your job, your employment as well. If you're employed, then your new employer should also be notified about the change of your address, because they need to reach you somewhere. They need to find you somewhere if you don't come to work or something. It's usually also part of the employment contract that you need to report changes like that. So that's another place where you should report the change of address. And on all the contracts you have, insurance like personal insurance, flat insurance, liability insurance, whatever, everywhere you have some contact address and you should move it to the new one. And that leads us to number one, related to immigration and your status as a foreigner in the Czech Republic or expat in the Czech Republic, and that's reporting the change to the Ministry of the Interior. That's very important for multiple reasons. First, you have to do it by law. If you're moving somewhere to a new place where you expect to live longer than 6 months, you have to report the change to the Ministry of the Interior within 30 days. If you don't do that, you might be fined up to 3,000 crowns. Okay, that's one thing. You have to do that by the law, and you could be fined if you don't do that. But third thing, and even more important, is that if you don't change the address with the Ministry of the Interior, they will still have you registered at the previous address. And that might be fine for most of the cases. But in case, for example, you are in the middle of your renewal, extension of your visa, extension of your residence permit, if the ministry doesn't have the new address and you're, for example, missing some documents, they would send a letter to you saying you're missing this and this and this, and you have 2 weeks to deliver it to us, otherwise we will deny your application. And if you've meanwhile moved and you haven't changed the address, they will send a letter to the address where you no longer live. And that could be a problem, because you then never receive the letter, and then they can deny your application because you didn't provide the documents they requested within time. So that's super important. Another thing, if you're applying for the partnership visa, for example, you have an EU partner, or you are an EU citizen and you have a partner from non-EU country. I made a video about that as well, so I will share the link there as well. But part of that process is that the foreign police will come visit you to the apartment where you live. And if you move meanwhile and you don't let the foreign police know or the Ministry of the Interior know, then it could be a big problem for your application as well. So maybe connected to that is one extra tip, that you should maybe leave your name on the mailbox. Just speak with the landlord or speak with the new tenants and ask them if they could leave your name on the mailbox for maybe a couple more weeks, because that will give you enough time to see, maybe receive some letters. You will receive a letter from all the benefit cards, from all the different, I don't know where you registered, a club card with Tesco or Moja from, or your whatever discount cards you have. You also had to use your deliver address there. So you might be missing all these letters as well. Of course, that's not as important as missing a letter from the Ministry of the Interior, But when you leave your name on the old mailbox for a bit, it usually reminds you, okay, I forgot to cancel this, and I need to move this address here as well. And it might remind you some other things you completely forgot about. So if it's possible, make sure that you leave your name on the old mailbox, on the mailbox of the old apartment. So if something is coming, the new tenants would notify you and you would not miss a letter. So that's it. Hopefully this was helpful. And thank you very much for the tip that I should do this video. So here you go. And see you again, guys, on Monday, Thursday, until the end of the world. See you. Yep. 6 people watching. Thank you very much. And see you next time, guys. Bye-bye. What's going on? It seems to be still recording, but I canceled the recording.